This is Jonathan Lane from Fan Film Factor, and today I am here with the dynamic duo of Farragut Films. The first fellow is Mr. John Broughton, who is the showrunner. He was the showrunner of Starship Farragut, which started it all, and now Farragut Forward, which premiered earlier on this year and was a masterpiece, I must say. John is not only the
Thank you.
showrunner, but also the star. He plays Captain, soon to be Admiral, Jack Carter. Yeah, gonna get that promotion in there. And then this other gentleman here is his partner in crime, Mr. Michael Bednar, who was his first officer, who was Robert R.T. Tackett, one of my favorite characters in fan films, by the way, who was the first officer of the Farragut and now is the captain of the USS Constitution. Michael Bednar also made a name for himself in hammering a lot of nails and painting a lot of plywood and making most of those amazing sets that you saw in Starship Farragut, later on in Star Trek Continues, and of course in infinite numbers of other fan films that were produced at what is now Neutral Zone Studios, which will be moving to Sandusky, Ohio, if you haven't actually seen that interview with Ray Tessie yet. But today we are not going to be talking about Neutral Zone Studios. We are going to be talking about Farragut Forward. We are going to be talking about the new episode of Farragut Forward, not the one you've just seen, but the one that they are making. We are also going to be talking about the crowdfunder so that they can pay for the new one that you are going to see hopefully at some point soon. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But first of all, gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome to Fan Film Factor. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for having us, Jonathan.
Oh, my pleasure. So, um, I want to ask, well, first of all, once again, amazing, amazing, amazing job on Farragut Forward. I mean,
Thank you.
a whole other level when it came to fan films. I mean, you knocked it out of the park. You did an amazing job. I already interviewed Paul Sieber and Johnny Kay, who was your director, and Paul was your villain,
Mhm.
and also one of the writers. And they covered a lot of the background of Farragut Forward. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. But the one thing that Paul couldn't answer for me is how did the whole thing start in the first place? You're doing Starship Farragut, you're in Kingsland, Georgia, it's 2016, you're working on your last episode, and
Well,
John
it
has an
it even
idea.
goes back. It,
Okay.
it goes back even before then. The idea came in 2012. We had just moved to the second studio, and we were looking to do our swan song, which was the crossing, and that Mike was essentially done. And so it was deliberately written by Paul that he would be getting the command of his own ship and departing the Farragut. And I was kind of done at that point when we did the crossing. So I was already looking, okay, what are we going to do next? We've done 60s TV Trek, 1970s animation, and I had always wanted to do the 1980s movie era with our Farragut universe. So transposing those characters, Carter, Tackett, Smithfield, Prescott, and put him in the movie era. Skipping the motion picture, going directly into the directly to the Wrath of Khan era on up. I started going into pre-production actually in 2012. We were going to use my garage, my two-car garage for part of the set. My dad was helping to build um, I think the helmet navigation console. We were getting the blueprints and things, but uniforms were being helped out by Michael Cowart and Teresa Ake, our two original plank owners for Farragut Forward. And that's the name I called it. And I talked to Mike about it. And I don't know how much interest he had in it at the time, but I know that it started in 2012. Um, and then so we did the crossing, and I think we had the Farragut Fest that December, so of 2014. Um, Vic, we started negotiations or discussions with Vic about selling the sets. And we sold them, I think, in February 2015, and we were already then in full force of pre-production for Farragut Forward. But Paul Sieber, in the contract, we had it so that we could, up to a point of 1 year, film at the studio for a week for free. and Paul Sieber had written, and the point of adding that in there was to do a documentary about the Farragut films, our what we had done up to that point, the first studio, the second studio, and then, how successful Star Trek Continues was, and that continuation, if you will, but how we were the forebearers of that. But I didn't have any kind of outline or anything laid out to do a documentary, and Paul was already working on, right after the crossing, he started to work on an idea that would um, close the chapter out and be a segue into the movie era. So the ending that you may recall from Homecoming, showing the travel pod leaving the Farragut, and we're thinking we're going to get like a Constitution. We trick the audience and we get a Miranda class starship, but it's a new starship. We wanted to do something different, and so Paul wrote that, and we moved forward with filming it, and we filmed it, this stuff at the bridge or on the ship back in, I think, January 2016.
And also, if I remember correctly, that had that wonderful cameo by Stan Lee before his
Yes. Hmm.
tragic death. How did you get Stan, by the way? How did you manage that little coup, or do you not want to share your secrets?
I'm sworn to secrecy on it, but
Oh boy.
I will
Oh,
just say that he was, they say don't meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed. And certainly, um, I felt that way when I first met Shatner, but certainly with Stan Lee, he was the real deal. And he was a gentleman and a ladies' man, and he was everything that an 8, 9-year-old kid who loves Spider-Man, would hope that this guy was, and he was that and more. So that was probably the pinnacle of one of the highlights of doing Starship Farragut.
no, I'm sure. Excelsior. We'll miss you,
Yes,
Stan.
we
Um,
tried to get that in there somehow, but it just, you know,
they
um,
could have given you the Excelsior, but no,
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
that was for
give me
Sulu.
the
By the
Excelsior.
by the way, why a Miranda class, and not a Constitution?
well, we've always tried to distinguish that it's not Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It's not the Enterprise. We try to stay well within canon, but Star Trek is nothing more than a space navy. So, and to further distinguish ourselves, we thought a Miranda class, which it had more. If I remember, Mike Bednar can correct me, but I believe it had more gun power. Um, it had more teeth than the Enterprise. So
Yeah.
that was something that was a plus. That this was
And
a
it has
finding.
what they call mega phasers.
Mega phasers
And
can fire
everybody who's ever asked me
rear
that
photon
question
torpedoes.
about why the Miranda class, and I always equate it to, if you ever watch the movie Generations, the ship that goes to save the people crashed on the planet is the Farragut. And it's a Nebula class, which looks very similar to a Miranda class. So I figured just kind of logically that made sense.
Yeah, might as well. Speaking of ships, by the way, I was going to ask how the two of you first got together, how the two of you first met, because I believe it has to do with a ship model. Who wants to tell that story?
Uh,
Go ahead, John.
I'll be brief. In 1995, when I was transitioning out of the Navy over at Anacostia in DC, I was going through what they call TAP, Transition Assistance Program. And I walked by Mike Bednar's office, and on his wall, he had pictures of models and props. And some were Star Trek, some were Lost in Space, Forbidden Planet, and I did an about face and introduced myself and striked up a conversation. And every time there was um, a break in our sessions, I would walk over and talk to Mike, and we developed a friendship. And he gave me his phone number and um, kept in touch. And even when I got out of the Navy, I stayed in the area. So, and I there was a convention I think with Scotty.
It was the very first convention I had ever been to in my life, John.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I had reached out and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about going to this. Would you want to come?" And we met up, and then subsequently thereafter, we get together on weekends, work on props and models. And he was teaching me like kung fu master. I was the young grasshopper, and showing me how to fill in pinholes in resin and make things look seamless, and telling me not to look at it,
I'd make
but
him
to
get out
feel
there with
it.
a magnifying glass to look at his work, to, close your eyes and just feel, see if there's any ripples, and just gave, it's gotta be 100% perfect before you put any paint on it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, in Mike's work, whether it's a prop or a model, I mean, it's flawless. I mean, it looks like it came right off Starfleet assembly line. It looks like it just came right out of the press.
well, I think many years ago, when I was still living on the East Coast, I saw because that was before Farragut existed, but I think I went back and I did a shore leave, and I think I saw one of Mike's ships at a shore leave. Did you guys ever bring one of your models there? Do you guys remember?
I'm sure we did. I know we
The
did.
only one I ever remember bringing to a convention was the Klingon battle cruiser.
Might have been that. All I remember is that there was the Farragut table, and then there was this absolute gorgeous model. But I don't remember which model it was because I'm
Where do you
57
live,
years old.
John?
I'm in Los Angeles now, so I'm
Okay.
way on the. But I grew up in New York City, and I used to go to shore leave all the time. So I am well aware of your hometown of Washington D.C. I've been there many times.
Now at Wonderfest, I'll have models displayed, but yeah.
But anyway, so getting back to well, let's finish up on Farragut Forward, because one of the things that we weren't able to talk about with Johnny and Paul was the amazing, the immaculate, I would say, uniforms that John created so lovingly and so
Stellar.
perfectly. And I believe that Johnny had said that you actually had more monster maroons
Monster
in your
Maroons that they
fan
made
fleet
in the first film. That's
than,
true.
than they
You
made
can
in
count
the
them
film.
on the film. Yeah. There weren't many that we could repurpose. My daughter's jacket was one that we could repurpose, but we have people of various sizes and physiques, and so we could not repurpose like they did in the first in Star Trek, the Wrath of Khan. I believe they made um, was it 12? I don't think it was 24. I think we made more than what they had made. I think I counted 28 that I made during the film. Yeah, and some were rejects that we burned. So everything was used, everything that was made. And rejects, I mean the first prototypes, because I was still learning how to make them. And, up until this point, I was intimidated by making that jacket. I've always been into fashion, and I did all the majority of the costumes in our legacy project, but that's a costume shirt. It's a raglan sleeve pattern, and in the way it's designed, you can easily tailor it by having someone put it on inside out. And all the uniforms in our legacy project looked well, they
Immaculate.
were all tailored, so they all looked
Yeah.
as they should. But that is much different than a Mons Maroon uniform, and that is essentially a a suit jacket, and even the pants, which you can't just get pants off the shelf. They're they got the bell bottom, and then they got the stripe, so you really can't use something off the shelf. You have to make everything. And the Trumpanto shirts, and we had someone that helped us make a whole bunch of those, so that helped greatly. The pants though, and the jackets for the most part were much more involved. And in 2016, so we were already in, this kind of segues back into the conversation about Farragut Forward. So Michael Cowart was helping me do a lot of research, and I started to figure out how we can make these jackets. And so we
Okay,
had the
so
fan film guidelines come out in 2016. We had the election. We had how we did not have a good time filming on the sets. Our week there was made. I don't. I have. I make. I'll make it publicly known that our lives for that week using the sets, our lives were made hell.
oh,
And so all of that had this negative vibe. And Jonathan, so I tabled the Farragut Forward project for 5 years. I hated Star Trek. I sold stuff. I gave stuff away, and I even threw stuff away. That's how badly I hated it. And have always been a James Bond fan as well, so I just gravitated towards that, and I started to learn how to make trousers, waistcoats, and then I was working on the suit and the cocktail cuff shirt that James Bond wears. I was taking classes with this little Lebanese lady who worked in Paris with all the designers. She was the tailor for the King of Jordan, and she's teaching me how to make British bespoke outfits. And through that process, and then during COVID, we had done everything and we were finishing up the jacket. And then when COVID hit, and then that kind of put the kibosh on any kind of classes. But up until that point, I had learned enough that I felt comfortable because when I looked at that, it is essentially just a suit jacket. I mean, it's fully lined. It's got shoulder pads. It's got the hair silk the horse canvas. It's got the rope sleeve heads. I mean, everything. It's just a suit jacket. It's just made a little bit differently with the flap, kind of like a double-breasted, but it's slightly different. So I felt comfortable to start working on that, and then um, figured enough from YouTube and other online research and was able to, I felt, nailed the jacket. But then later when we got Frank Scone involved, he showed me a few things and I had to up my game. I mean, things that I just learned from him. But he's the master. But
Yeah.
I felt like I did a really good job on what was needed for the first film. But in the first film, Frank added a lot of value because we had the enlisted jumpsuits made
Oh,
of
they were
those heavy duty
gorgeous.
spandex, which
Everything was
was
just
repurposed motion picture outfits. And then he made the medical uniforms so that we saw in sick bay. Those were beautiful.
yeah.
So
Everything was
um,
beautiful. You had the bomber jacket. I mean, I love that. That's my favorite of all Star Trek uniforms. I love that bomber jacket.
we try to get as many uniforms in that first film as possible.
Oh yeah.
We didn't get the security guard. We're working to have it in the second one. And if you may have missed it in the first film, but you got to see the waiter from Star Trek 6.
Copy
Oh, I
service,
know.
yes.
Yeah. I saw those. In fact, I mentioned those in the interview with Paul and Johnny that those are in there. By the way, I want to interrupt very briefly here. For anybody who is watching this, who thinks the character of Garrick from Deep Space Nine is not believable, because how could somebody go from being a super secret part of the Obsidian Order to just being a plain, simple tailor? Okay,
Yeah.
that's what he did. He went from being James Bond to being a tailor, and also a naval officer to being a tailor, and an amazing one. I mean, the fact that, I mean, the amount of stuff that that you taught yourself and learned through classes, and I mean, most of us don't do that, obviously. I mean, I can't sew to save my life.
Well,
Uh,
I guess that OCD, I mean, the one part about me is that it's got to be perfect. I mean, and I will
It's driven.
keep making
John is driven.
something over and over until it's just right. And um, you may have seen the one outfit that for Farragut Forward, it's the Admiral Kirk civilian Star Trek 3-4 outfit. We have that featuredly or prominently featured in Farragut 2024. That's the name of our sequel.
oh, okay, good.
And Frank Scone helped me with the jacket. I should start off. So I knew of a private collector, and Mike and I visited his collection, and I was able to study that outfit for like 12 hours, which went by very quickly. But I traced every seam, I measured every piece, I examined, took videos, pictures, and I'd always loved that outfit. The three outfits of the movie era was obviously the Moss Maroon, the bomber jacket, and then the outfit that Kirk wore in Star Trek 3 and 4. Um, and I wanted that for my own. And so I had all this information, tracings, all this stuff, but without a pattern. I mean, I had a baseline pattern that I thought would work, but you know, to translate all this data, if you will, Frank Scone basically took it, and it was like sticking all these things into the back computer, and he was able to then, help me with the patterns and we worked it out. But the guy he is a master. I mean, Frank is a wizard as it comes to these costumes, and a lot of it he does a lot of medieval, Renaissance fair type outfits, and he's been doing this, for many, many years. Whereas I'm only 20 plus years in. He's done it considerably longer, but and has a very diversified background of making all these very complex things. And I mean, he just dove right in it. And I would never been able to do what he had done. So without his help. So thanks in advance to him on that outfit. But when I made the pants, there was a few things that I just not right. And so I'm making another pair. Then there's just so a perfectionist, I think, helps because you see little details, and Star Trek fans will nitpick the hell out of anything.
That's for
And
sure.
so we worked, I think, collectively hard, but I think for all of us, we try to set the vanguard. We try to set the bar hard. We try to set the bar high because we as fans have an expectation that we're trying to see what they would have had. If Farragut was a real sequel, if Farragut was a real sequel in the franchise, then we would have had this expectation it would have looked like this, and that's what we were everyone was striving for.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about fan films is, there are a few out there that, endeavor to be movie era, like for example, the various Potemkin Pictures, fan films, but they don't have the money that you raised, and they do what they can. They wear polo shirts, or not polo shirts. They wear t-shirts, and they put the little rank pin over here. They have like one or two Monster Maroons that they use, and everybody else is wearing sort of simplified versions of it. And you just kind of have to, as when you're watching a fan film, you have to kind of put your brain in disbelief and acceptance mode, as I like to say. um except with Farragut Forward. I mean, Farragut
Well,
Forward,
that's the
I
thing
love
that
watching.
separates us from others is that we
Yeah.
we were never trying, although it is technically a fan film, we were working towards having a full feature film. We were trying to have it of the quality of what would be made in Hollywood. So, and to your point, yes, there's other productions and they're doing their own thing, and I would never slight another production. But we're trying to just create what we would.
No,
If I can
you
interject
guys are in
though,
a, yeah, I was just saying that you guys are in a whole other level, and
one of the
that,
things that I think kind of separates us from most groups is usually with some of those groups, you have one person who's kind of running the show. John was smart enough that he got people in the right place to do things. And, mine was props and sets. Holly did some of the casting. John was wardrobe. So everybody kind of had their niche. And John, it's kind of like running a business. It's all delegated to a different group, different branch, and it's done. And I think that's why we excelled at doing what we did because everybody had their responsibility and
Yeah, we had department heads,
yeah.
and like Mike said, I mean, each person was responsible, and that's where their area of expertise and came into play.
and Mike, were you the department head for the set construction?
Yeah,
No, not for
No?
this one. For all of Starship
yeah,
Farragut, I was, but
right.
not for Farragut
but
Forward.
but but not
I
for Farragut Forward. But
no,
you are
I told
credited.
John,
There
I
are
said,
like there are 55 people who are
yes,
credited in your
I did some work,
for working on sets. So one
but
of
I
them
was
is
just a helper, and I remember I had the new team that was going to be doing the construction. I invited them over to the house and sat them down and did a handoff. This is the lessons learned from doing the Farragut sets, TOS. This is what you need to do. These are the people that you need to garner. And my go-to person with the TOS sets was Greg Green. And I told the leaders of the Farragut Forward group, I said, you need to find your Greg Green. And they did. And the whole thing just kind of took off. And I did some work as far as cutting out pieces and things like that, but
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
not involved
And
with
if
working
I
for
could add to that, so we had a guy who we had worked with before. and he said that he was going to help us with set construction. But I could never get him to commit to any time frame, at any basis of estimate for budget. It was just, and every time I would say, when would the sets be done? He said, it's all based on manpower. Well, tell me how many people you need. I'll get the people, but I need you to have a game plan and drive the bus. And he would never do. So that guy, he resigned. There was a theater production, and he's like, I'm totally committed. I can't do it. And that was on a Thursday. And I think on this project, Jonathan, we've been blessed because every time a door closed, a better one opened. And on that Thursday, the guy who was going to lead up sets left, and we had a new guy on that Saturday. And I should say, what I mean is a master carpenter or some guy that really understood sets. We had Scott Einhoff, who was our director of set construction. And he was reluctant to even taking on that role. But I said, you are an HR professional. He is part of the management team at the company he is with. And I said, you know how to corral people, you know how to organize, you know how to communicate, you can facilitate meetings. That's what we need. And I said, we'll get the SMEs and the skilled carpenters, and then your grunt workers, if you will, those that like me, I would categorize myself in that as it relates to sets. You need all those people, but you need to have your director, your SMEs, and we had Scott had his brother who was a master carpenter who did some outstanding stuff. And then you have Dave Moretti, and that's the guy I was mentioning that I met at Garrett's house along with Scott and Ari. Garrett Dare was a guy who provided us a lot of the Klingon related materials. Um, but I went up to Pennsylvania and I met Dave, and he had already printed out. He's like, yeah, I know you guys want to build this corridor set, but I, I think you need to make it longer. And the sick bay set, you need to have it longer to give more depth of field. And
He already had it drawn up in CAD,
yes. And so I said, I knew at
segmented, how
that
much
point we
lumber
had
is
the
needed,
right guy.
everything. Yeah.
So again, we've been blessed, and that there's a lot of instances where in Farragut Forward where we just had the intersection of one person to another, and it just like we were really blessed on how things evolved on this project.
It's amazing sometimes with fan films how things just can fall into place. If you have the right people working in the right jobs, the right tools for the right jobs, the right people for the right jobs. Uh,
Exactly.
that
That's true.
so many things, because that's the thing is a lot of times I will say, the showrunner is irreplaceable. There's always got to be somebody who, if they stop running, everybody stops running and waits for them. Almost every show, every fan film has somebody like that. But if that person has to be everything to all people, that can wear somebody out. And if you have if you have your first officer, if you have your department heads, depending on how big your fan film is, if you have somebody that you can rely on to take that baton, to just, run with you and not necessarily for you, it
Right.
can make a better fan film, especially, the bigger ones, the ones that, there's, I mean, obviously, Vance Major, when he made his Constar stuff, he's just basically filming on a cell phone, and, Vance wasn't there, it didn't happen. And if he was there, it did. But, to do something like Farragut Forward, you couldn't do it if it was just John, or just Michael, or just, any of the people there. You had this team that was really, just vibing, and it was very evident. I am going to transition now into Farragut 2024, because from what I have heard, you have a great team again, but it's not the same team, or some of it is the same team and some
Well,
of it's not.
that's yes and no. We've got so Mike, who was integral to sets, was more answery. I mean, Mike did he did his bit for King and Country, so no one, but like he said, he did meet with the key people and he imparted knowledge and wisdom to them. and gave them insight that I think was valuable. Mike's my best friend. He's, 30 years now. And so I'm just blessed to have him and Holly be along for the ride. He does great prop work, and Mike has made some of the props that you'll see. And I'd love to see more of his work because I know that that's kind of like akin to models, and he's just exceptionally talented with those
Oh, look at that. How
Starship
beautiful is
models.
that? Now
So
that's in the process of being made there, Mike, right?
I've got 12 right now that are in the works.
12 right now that are in the works.
so we've got a new director of set construction. Um, let's see, yeah, I mean it's and Dave Moretti has kind of stepped up and is doing a lot of things that like a co-executive producer or I guess in Hollywood it'd be an associate, you know, um, someone that would be a line producer, if you will.
Line
So
producer. Okay.
yeah, he's doing a lot of the production management oversight along with me. So I
The
am
line
when I
producer is
started
the
this,
person
I
who,
was
yeah,
32 and I'm
yeah.
now 52. So I'm
But
in
you feel like you're
my
82 after doing all this,
I
right?
do, yes, yes. And your tolerance for pain and things that like, it just wears the soul down. So when little things happen, and Mike's usually my go-to guy. I was chatting with him over the weekend because I'm like, this guy's just getting on my nerves, and he just gave his little brother some wisdom just to to appease me, keep me from going off to the deep end. But yeah, it's so we've got some new players, but there's a lot of people that are still involved as they were. We have Mike and Holly still involved. Paul Sieber, he was there from the beginning. We have him as a different character now. Still wanted him to act, but
Because he can't die. He has to keep coming back in front of the
well,
camera.
he was trying not to die. He was trying to have his the correct the prime Prescott. He was trying to keep that one that he actually had lived in the alternate universe and was trying to bring him back. I'm like, no, we're done with Prescott. We're good. And I didn't want to disparage or to belittle the sacrifice that Prescott did in the crossing for his shipmates. So yeah, so Paul is involved. We're bringing back Dr. Bishop, who was in A Rock and a Hard Place. She's making a cameo. We have two special guest celebrities. We have Wes Johnson again. He won't be a Klingon, but he'll be an admiral. And then we have Sylvia Tremor Morrison. And if you don't know who she is, she was the first African American SNL, Saturday Night Live writer. She does
Oh,
impressions. She did the roast for Muhammad Ali. Red Fox was her manager
oh wow.
from Sanford and Sons, and let's see, she does a lot of impressions. Oh, when Houston went on tour, she went to like 24, 27 cities and was the opening act for Whitney Houston. So she's a comedian and impressionist, and there was a role specifically written because this story, let's face it, Farragut Forward, we were up here in terms of drama, intensity. It was our revenge. It was our Moby Dick. It was our of Wrath of Khan inspired story. This one that we're doing now, we have to take it back down. We need to decompress. So this is a lighthearted story, a fish out of the water. And we've got a lot of inspiration from Star Trek for the Voyage Home, which was another fan favorite. And then what we intend to do if
Are you
things go
going to
well,
time travel? Oh, I
I
shouldn't
don't,
say anything now.
I shouldn't say anything more, but it is
Okay.
like I said, I've said enough. It is a
Okay.
lighthearted fish out of water story, and but it's all original. It's Farragut. I mean, we spent 6 months, Dave Moretti, Jim Brooks, and I. We spent 4 months on just the story outline, and then another 2 months on the dialogue. And Jim wrote all of that. Jim took our notes for and really put together the outline, and then he wrote the screenplay. And for those that don't know Jim Brooks, he wrote the screenplay for the rightful heir, the introduction of Kalis into the Star Trek
Oh, the
The
TNG
Next
episode,
Generation.
Rightful Heir. Oh, okay.
So we
You have a
have,
Star Trek writer
we
writing your
do.
script? That's
Yeah.
amazing. And by the way, and anybody who's now going to be picking up pitchforks and saying, "Oh, the guidelines say that you can't use anybody who ever worked on Star Trek." It's like, yeah, but you know what? People have done that. It's okay.
Yeah,
Stop.
he's not making, he's
And the
all,
guy,
we're all, I should point out, Jonathan, everyone involved in Farragut 2024, all volunteers. No one is being compensated for their
Hmm.
time and effort. All the expenses that will be raised on our crowdfunder, like the previous one, were used for sets, wardrobe, shipping costs. We have to, because I should point out, our we have one person in upstate New York who does some of the wardrobe, and we have another person, Frank Sconey, living in Chicago. So there's fabrics and things have to be transported. So you have those costs. You have craft services when we film, and just other expenses. But all the expenses go towards what you see on film.
And folks, there's a lot of expenses that, I mean, first of all, those uniforms have got to be ridiculous. I mean, they've got to be several $100s each, right?
oh yeah, more.
Several. The jacket, if I were to, and I have, I mean, I've sold. Well, I applied the sale towards someone that was a walk-on role, but is essentially that jacket itself for me. If I were in, it'd be 1,500. The amount of
Okay.
labor that goes into that suit, it's a lot of work. And you have not only that, you've got the fabric, you've got the notions, you've got the chain, you've got the rank pins. You're making a leather belt. There's a lot
The
of,
props that Mike is making, the sets have got to be ridiculously expensive. Because they look so amazing. I mean, and I know it's probably not
Tell
the
them about the basis for the chairs.
oh yeah, the bases for the chair, the steel welded bases, they were,
They're
I mean,
$110 a piece.
and how many
Just
chairs did
just
you have?
just the metal base that holds the chair to the bit that's $110.
And you guys probably had like about 10 or 12 chairs at least, right?
we had,
Probably more than that for 20 for the next one. We're working on it.
we had,
You got
I think 6 chairs,
Yeah.
and we're adding another one. We're having a dedicate, now that so Paul Sieber is going to be an engineer and a Frosian engineer at that,
oh boy.
which just
Makeup
goes,
costs, by the way, makeup costs.
yes, the effects
Yes.
makeup, yes. Oh my
Uh-huh.
God.
Oh yeah.
And we
No,
don't
that's
do anything halfway. I mean, if you look at the Klingon bridge, what we had it as a stretch goal and we exceeded the stretch goal. So we provided a full 360 interior set, even with a ceiling. And when you walked on that Klingon bridge set, it felt like you were really on it. I mean, it was just,
where's the blood
um,
one?
Must have been
so we
amazing.
don't do anything halfway. And we've
You
got
actually done.
welded banisters that we're working on for this. We're going to make some refinements for the ferry, just subtle things that we as fans want to see, and didn't get the opportunity to have done in the first one. But yeah, it's it's a massive undertaking. I mean, there's a reason why no one else is playing and doing it the way that we're doing it. I mean, and
When you
it's
think about
because
it,
of complexities and cost.
the lumber and the paint alone for the sets, but then you got to think about all the computers that were behind moving the screens. All that was done, you know.
And and something that people don't often think about. I mean, I don't know if you're doing this for people, but when I made Interlude, I had a lot of people who were local, but they were still, coming across Georgia. Sometimes they were, coming from states bordering Georgia. I paid for their gas. If they were staying overnight, I paid for their lodging. A couple of people had to be flown in because they,
Yeah,
were people who were in, and I paid for their plane tickets. I mean, all of this stuff adds up. You fly somebody in,
it's
and
in,
boom, there's $600.
I shipped 2 boxes today to wardrobe people, and because of the weight, it was, and I shipped it UPS Advantage, and it was $70 for each of the 2 boxes. So that
I
was
shipped the box today.
140.
It's $6.20.
I'll, I'll tell you a quick funny story. I don't know. Did either one of you guys see Interlude, the fan film I did? Don't all speak at once. Okay, if you didn't.
I have
Um,
I saw the
okay.
animated Dr. McCoy and Spock.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you liked that one. I hope you liked that one.
I
No, the
did.
first one I did was I basically wanted to show Alec this is what an Axanar fan film would look like if we actually filmed it on the Ares Bridge set. Um, and it can be done in 2 years. It was possible, but anyway, there was a scene that lasted for the better part of about maybe 12 seconds of Admiral Ramirez in sickbay with a beam basically through his chest. I mean, he had been wounded. The whole idea of interlude is that Ramirez has been wounded and one of the ships has to basically sacrifice itself so the Ares can get away. And that uniform was custom made in Italy by the person Claude, who Claude Dozier, who made the same ones for Axanar. It was $500. This beautiful, beautiful admiral's uniform to make it and to ship it from Italy. And the first thing that was done when it arrived in Arkansas was that one of my directors, Victoria Fox, proceeded to cut a hole in it and take a ketchup, molasses, whatever, and put blood stains on it and essentially ruin this $500 uniform. And literally like the first 6 hours that she had it. And it's just like, this is what we do when we make fan films. We spend lots of money. It's like, okay, poof. Which, by the way, let's not forget that there is a crowdfunder, everybody. That like this money doesn't grow on a tree. You basically have to give these folks your generous donations to help them out. And the first time that they did a crowdfunder for Farragut Forward, and then I have to apologize to John for this because I heard he was going to be setting a goal of $30,000, and at the time, and this was back during the COVID, stuff, the lockdown, it was like 2021 or whatever. And I thought, and first of all, since the guidelines had come out, in 2016, nobody had raised more than like 15 or $18,000, and he's starting off with 30, and I'm like John, maybe you want to set a little bit lower just to make sure that you can, get it, and then obviously then you'd be on in demand status. And John's like, I'll get it. I'll get it. I was like, oh, okay. I'm not sure if you can do it, but anyway, he did it. He blew right past that 30,000 to 33 in the 60 days. So, once again, my apologies, John. I should have trusted you.
No,
Uh,
you ate crow. You told me,
I
and
totally ate my
I
crow.
appreciate that.
Um, but
Because yeah, I mean, and I would say that I had faith in our fan base and our cast and crew and everyone involved, our backers would come through for us. I felt it. So,
and
and
and they did. They absolutely
and I
did.
think anyone that's seen the film can see that all the money went into that and then some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I mean, I was a donor as well. We totally got our money's worth, and so I think by the time that you'd closed it down, which was a few months ago, you were at like $47,000, which
yeah, we
is going.
stopped it deliberately just shy of the 50K threshold.
Don't want to
And
accidentally
it's
go
done
over.
by.
Don't piss off CBS and Paramount. Uh,
Yeah,
oh, excuse me.
that is something that is of concern to them.
Yeah, and that's totally understandable. I mean, a lot of people, and I was one of them. When they first came out with the guidelines, and they were putting all of these quote unquote draconian rules into effect. But in a lot of cases, these rules have, I wouldn't say been good for fan films, but have at least taken some of the stress off of fan films because we know how much is too much now. After Axanar raised 1.2 million and Renegades raised 850,000, and Star Trek Continues was breaking the $200,000 barrier or whatever. And at the same time they were doing that, you guys, you got like 16 or 20,000 or whatever. So most fan films were not getting 5 and 6 and 7 figure budgets. All the fans are like, they killed Star Trek fans. No, 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 they didn't kill Star Trek fan films. They killed Star Trek fan films that were being made at such a level as to potentially cause confusion in the marketplace. One of the reasons that Axanar got sued was because the worry with Discovery coming out was that Axanar, obviously it wasn't the same thing, except that it was still something that was taking place 10 years or 20 years before Kirk during a war with the Klingons. And CBS and Paramount didn't want something free on YouTube that somebody might come across and say, oh, I found the new Star Trek series, but it's free on YouTube. I don't have to pay to just subscribe to at that point it was all access. I don't have to pay for that. So they didn't want confusion in the marketplace, and totally understandable. It's their IP. But as one of the people who was irate when it first came out, I actually see the guidelines as ultimately more of a good thing than a bad thing.
So I would definitely agree with you. I think it provides framework for which people they now have a construct in which they can operate in, and they are guidelines, they're not rules.
Mhm.
Um, Certain ones are more important than others. But and I think for Farragut Films, for the 20 years that we've been doing this, we've stayed to the spirit of them from the get-go.
I think most fan films do. I mean, the vast majority of them. Now, I know that actually Farragut Forward did go over the time limit. Did CBS or Paramount contact you at all, or have you been in touch with them at all, or
No,
so? And I
we're
said
not
to
like the fish the three that you mentioned earlier, and that those got more of a interest. What we're trying to do, I think they recognize that we're again staying within the guidelines and in the spirit of the law, if you will. They see what we're doing and
yeah.
they recognize it for what it is. So
Well, I also know that John Van Citters in general, as much as people think that he's some kind of evil hates fan film guy, he actually kind of likes these things. He likes what fans are doing to celebrate Star Trek. The last thing that I think the folks at CBS and Paramount want right now is with the recent sale and Skydance coming in is to make too much of any kind of a stink with the fans, because they're not quite sure yet what Skydance's philosophy is as far as fans and fan films go. And if Skydance turns out to be like, hey, let them play, it's fine, then you don't want to be the person who goes and sicks the $500 to $1,000 an hour lawyers on them. So I think in a lot of ways, people who are saying CBS and Paramount are going to come down your asses because you went 10 minutes over or 12 minutes over, whatever. No, I think it's mostly like, look, they're obviously trying their hardest to follow our rules. Nobody's getting paid. They're not using our actors. We don't want to see Tim Russ playing Tuvok, as good as he is. We don't want to, you know, Garrett Wong, was wonderful as Harry Kim, but no, you can't make, when 60-year-old Ensign Kim in your fan film. You're going to have to find somebody else to play him. But for the most part, I think the fans are doing it right, and good for us and good for you guys. So I want to let people know that you are doing another crowdfunder, and if I remember correctly, before the interview, John, you said you're going to be setting the goal once again at 30,000. Is that correct?
hmm and
And
I would say, unlike the last time, we didn't have any basis. I mean, we didn't know what any of these costs were. When we did the Legacy project, we would build some new sets, film on them. We accumulated more and more sets through each production, and we just added on. And with the addition of those sets, then they were always made available for future use. For Farragut Forward, everything, wardrobe, sets, props, everything had to be built from the ground up. And there's nothing that you can purchase and just repurpose. Like on the bridge set or in the Starfleet Lounge, you could buy those Burke chairs and redress them. There's those bridge chairs are all built from scratch. Foam, the spandex that's used to cover them, the welded bases that Mike Mike mentioned, I mean, it's a lot of expenses associated with this project.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And from what I remember, I think it was Mike telling me you guys were building some new sets that you haven't seen yet, right?
Yes, we're gonna. So in Farragut 2024, we'll see the Farragut's transporter room.
Cool.
We will also see the antagonist ship. So he has a smaller ship. It's bigger than a shuttlecraft, but and that can cloak. So we get to see that ship, the interior of that. We're gonna see the Farragut's conference room. So um, yeah, those are the new sets that we're gonna see. Um, there's some location film shoots, but then there's some set dressing and set pieces that will be used to augment those exterior film shoots.
Now, speaking of shoots, I know that you've already had one exterior location shoot, and I wanted to mention one other new person who wasn't involved in Farragut Forward, who is coming in for Farragut 2024, and that is your director, Joshua
Yes,
Irwin.
Josh. Hmm.
Uh-huh. And for those few people in the fan film community who haven't heard of Josh Irwin, and I don't know if there's any of them left, but Josh is the showrunner and the force behind the Avalon Universe fan series, as well as sort of all-purpose Keebler elf who just keeps going and helping other fan filmmakers. And he's been a director, he's been a director of photography, he's been a cameraman. He appears, he acts occasionally. He basically just does whatever people ask him to do, which completely confounds me, although he was my director on Interlude. Um, but he's also an editor himself, and he does special effects, not the CGI based, ship effects, but little things like when you see smoke in the background and it's not really smoke, or
Practical
uh,
effects. Yep.
practical effects. He put the mirror universe symbol on the red doors behind the bridge, even though it wasn't there. Uh, and he did that for like an entire bridge scene where it didn't exist, and suddenly it did. Like, the man is a wizard. So, my question for you is, how how is it that Josh came to be working on Farragut 2024? First of all, how did you meet him, and how did you decide to bring him on as director?
That's a good question. We were doing some parody videos and some not parody, some promotional videos, and I think I just reached out to him. I had saw some of his work and asked if he'd be interested in directing our second film. I knew in advance that Johnny was going to take a break, and I don't know why I didn't follow his lead. Um, but so I reached out to Josh and asked him to help us with some promotional videos. And I said, hey, if Johnny doesn't do the second one, which I knew he wasn't going to do, would you be interested? And he said, oh, yeah. So um, we've flown him out here a couple of times, and he's filmed some stuff for us so far, and so far so good. Um, but yeah, like you described him, I mean, he genuinely loves Star Trek fan films. He just loves this stuff. So any way that he can be involved, I think in a quality product, he's gonna back it.
Oh yeah, and I remember when you guys were first creating your bridge sets, and I was talking to Josh. Josh is a friend of mine, so we can occasionally just chat without actually doing a Zoom interview. And he was saying that those bridge sets were so gorgeous, and he would so love to film on them at some point. This is before you ever met him or whatever. And I said, well, why don't you reach out to John? I said, I'm happy to just link the two of you up, and and I am.
Yeah,
And
I don't know how we got connected other than the promotional videos. I asked him if he could help, and he came out, and we actually it was the weekend after we had filmed, and we had a wrap party out on the bridge set, and he came out and was a part of that. So the cast and crew got a chance to meet with him as well. And he did a really good job making our promotional videos, which up until that point we had never worked together. So him doing that, it was a good opportunity for the cast and crew to try him out and see how things would work, and worked well.
so you're liking him so far?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Okay, Josh, you get to keep your job. Well, I know that you guys had you had a 3-day shoot, if I remember correctly,
Yes,
a few weeks ago.
yes.
Now, how many more shoots do you? I mean, I'm obviously more than just one or two more, I'm guessing, but
Sure,
how?
sure. So we have one related to Goddard Space Center, and then we have some of the ship scenes. There's the interior bad guy ship, and then there's the conference room and transporter scenes. Those will be filmed all in the same time. And then the bridge. And we're not only talking about Farragut Bridge, but the Constitution Bridge. So significant time has to be spent reconfiguring. We have to swap out the seat covers, and there's new graphics. A lot of the plant-ons are different. And we have a whole color scheme for the Constitution, which Mike, being the captain, we
He let me pick the color.
You get to be the interior decorator because you're the captain. And I know the Constitution actually has 2 turbolift doors, whereas the Miranda only has 1 turbolift in the back. Is that right?
I think you are right. Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess we have to build another or have a faux turbo lift door. But yeah,
Or shoot in one direction and not shoot in the other. Uh, Josh knows how to do that.
We'll make them both work.
there
There you
may
go.
be another turbo lift on Farragut. We on the bridge. We just may not have seen it yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
It might be. It might be on the other side or something. I don't know.
well, you can always do what we did with Starship Spotter, which I don't know if you guys are aware of that book. Came out in 2001, I believe. It was my friend Mojo who was doing visual effects on Voyager at the time, and it was basically going to be a bunch of 3D ships. Ultimately, I think 30 different ships from Star Trek history, from the original Enterprise through the new Enterprise, the D, the E, Ambassador class, Voyager, Defiant, Klingon ships, Romulan ships, and everything had to be written up. So there was a every ship had a sort of little text history and then all of the specs. And you guys may not be aware of this, but I wrote it. I did not do
Oh my
the
God.
3D visuals, but I wrote it. I also wrote it in 18 days. There's a story behind that, and I'll tell that on my blog at some point. But anyway, I couldn't have written it by myself. So I brought in Alex Rosenzweig, and I'm sure you guys both know who that is because he's a frequent. Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He's got glasses, short.
mhm. Short
Um,
fellow, very big bushy beard.
yes.
My former commanding officer on the USS Avenger back when I was in Starfleet on the East Coast as opposed to here on the West Coast. And anyway, Alex, the kind of person who memorizes NCC numbers. We used to do a little Rain Man games. Like I'd give him an MCC number and he would give me the starship name. And oh, that's the USS
This
Golem.
this guy actually, Mike, had told us that we improperly the Farragut should have been 1705
Yeah.
versus
Yep. Yep.
1647.
Yep.
Yeah, the whole yeah. They don't know that. But anyway, so I brought Alex in to help me write this. So I wrote all the prose and he wrote all of the, like this is the warp speed, this is the length of it. Also a very funny story in the midst of all this. I was on a phone call with Alex and John Van Sitters that lasted for a half an hour of the two of them arguing whether the Enterprise D was 642 meters long or 642 and a half meters long.
Oh my gosh.
Swear to God. But anyway, because everything in Starship Spotter was going to be considered canon. So at the time, I was serving on the USS Avenger, and this was an interesting thing because the Avenger was an Avenger class, and the Avenger class was a Miranda class, except that it was a Miranda class in TNG, and it was an Avenger class, in the 1980s when we didn't have TNG yet. And anyway, so we put in the prose the explanation of this. We sort of hid a little corrective canon in the prose of Starship Spotter. And the Avenger class was the refit of the Coventry class. The Miranda class was a brand new class. built with the same structural design as the Avenger class because they determined that it was, in terms of warp dynamics, it was a very compact and very efficient warp bubble use for speed and for defense and for shielding. So that this is why there was both an Avenger class and a Miranda class. One was a refit, an upgrade, and one was built from scratch. So depending on which one Farragut is, you could explain one turbolift versus two turbolifts. If you want to say the Reliant was, part of that upgrade class, then you could say that if you have two, then you're a Miranda class. So just throwing that out for you if you want it.
Okay.
Even on naval vessels of the same class, they're not the same.
Exactly.
There's many different differences. So yeah,
and of course the captain, gets to choose the color scheme, for his ship, because that's what captains do.
exactly. Exactly.
All right, so let's finish this up because I know you guys have other things to do with your lives. When should fans expect to see a finished Farragut 2024, since 2024 is going to be over?
Well, Josh has promised me that and he's already been editing what we've shot. He intends to release it on his birthday next year, which is either in June or July. And he said that that is a birthday gift to himself that he wants to. So, but he's given me a firm commitment that it'll be out much sooner. Farragut Forward, because we had to build sets, film on them, build other sets, film on them, and rinse and repeat several times. That's why it took us a 2 year time frame. But with this, the sets are not as complicated. But he's assured me that in June, July, you'll see the film.
Oh, that is cool. And Josh does run a tight ship. I have to say that, with Interlude as well, we got everything that we needed filmed for Interlude pretty much in 2 days of shooting, and a third day in Arkansas, and that was everything that we needed for that fan film. And he's good, and he does a great job with the Avalon universe as well. So, but this obviously brings up the most important question then. If it's being released in 2025, why is it being called Farragut 2024?
Because it takes place, we filmed the location. We thought it was important that, especially just the way things are right now, that we should film it and say that it was historically it'll be accurate because we did film in DC, and the exterior locations we did film in 2024. So that's when the Farragut, goes back in time.
And with luck, there'll still be a mall around
There it is.
after January 6th of next year, for you guys to film on. But anyway, okay, well, that is definitely something to look forward to. We are so excited to see more of Farragut. Will there be any more? I mean, you said you did your Wrath of
Yeah,
Khan,
so yeah,
your
after
voyage
this
home.
one, so Farragut Forward, we took it up, we're going back down in like a wave, if you will. We gotta ratchet back up. And so the third one will be Farragut Finale. It's a
Oh,
three-part trilogy, just like Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. Each story dovetails into the other, and it's a serialized trilogy. And so we've got a vision for and how we wrap it up. But then the Farragut universe, although I won't be prominently in the series at that point, we'll have these ships and characters that you've seen for the last 20 years. And there'll be, within the Farragut universe, if you will, there'll be these other ships and captains, and their stories could be told. And as Josh and I have talked about him filming it and myself directing it, that's what the end game is.
well,
The
that is
infrastructure will be there for anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, the vehicle will be there with the sets, costumes, props. No, there's no place else on planet Earth where you'll have these movie era sets and wardrobe and props to make a fan film, but it will exist, for others. But yeah, I'm not trying to do this indefinitely, but my end game was to direct, so I can continue to tell new stories, but not be in front of the camera, which is what I want to do. But for the trilogy, this was something near and dear, and I had a vision for how I wanted this overarching story. So
Oh, well. Well, I mean, I am so much more excited than I was even an hour ago when we started this because you know, you guys do amazing work, and the more Farragut and Farragut Forward and Farragut 2024 and Farragut Finale that we get, that the happier I am as a fan. So gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your
thank you
dedication
for having us, Jonathan.
and for everything that you guys have been given to the fans. So anyway, I'm gonna stick up my hand right now and say live long and prosper.
Thank you.
Take care.